We're going to begin with activity 60, and just want to review something that we've learned earlier in the class that is going to be very important for what we're going to study now with the 14th Amendment. So I want to remind us that one of the meanings of liberty that we've studied is personal liberty in the singular, and that refers to freedom from physical restraint, and this right has to do usually when someone is wrongly imprisoned, they've been deprived of this right. In the plural, personal liberties, this refers to personal choices. This is the meaning of liberty that we talked about. That means having a large area of personal choice without interference from government. So let's keep that in mind as we go through this activity. We're going to begin with the meaning of the terms of the 14th Amendment. We saw last time that what's called the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, which reads, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. These are the three rights that we've been very familiar with for the whole length of the class. And in the context of these three rights, when you're talking about the three basic rights and what the word liberty means in that context, it always means freedom from personal restraint. We saw that in the previous activity when we studied the definition of Blackstone, which the framers of the 14th Amendment used as they were framing this amendment, and it was the understanding of that word for many years previous to that. So we're going to finish up the actual wording of the 14th Amendment with what's called the Privileges and Immunities Clause, which reads, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States. So it may help to think about in terms of which branch of government is being addressed. The legislature makes laws and the executive branch enforces laws, so this is talking about the laws made by the legislative branch of the states and the way in which it's carried out by the executive branch. So no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States. Whereas this part of the Due Process Clause that we studied last time has to do with the judicial branch, the proceedings of the courts. The state governments can't take away someone's life, liberty, imprison them, or property, fine them, unless they've been convicted of a crime in a court of law. The natural question when you're reading this part of the 14th Amendment and trying to figure out its terms is, what are privileges and immunities? It turns out that this phrase also has a very precise definition as far as which rights are guaranteed. We think of privileges and immunities as being rather vague, but legal terms have precise meanings, and you can go to the legal authorities to see what they are. So letter A makes it clear that we're just dealing with the same rights, life, liberty, and property, as in the Due Process Clause, just being referred to the actions of different branches of the government. Kent says that the privileges and immunities conceded by the Constitution of the United States to citizens of the several states were to be confined to those which were in their nature fundamental and belonged of right to the citizens of all free governments, such are the rights of protection of life and liberty and to acquire and enjoy property. These are the three rights we've talked about all along, with liberty meaning, again, freedom from physical restraint. Kent is talking about this in the early 1800s, many years before there was a 14th Amendment, because this phrase, there is a phrase about privileges and immunities in Article 4 of the original U.S. Constitution, so this was a well-understood legal terminology. And you can see that when the 14th Amendment or the Civil Rights Bill is being discussed before the 14th Amendment was proposed, and even afterwards when it was being discussed, I can see on April 7th that this definition of Kent was used in Congress, both in the Senate and in the House, to define what privileges and immunities means. So our study of the terms of the 14th Amendment confirms what we've seen already, that the 14th Amendment guarantees only the rights of life, liberty, and property, and no other rights at all. That's proved, I think, by the historical study we did about what the problems were that the Civil Rights Bill and the 14th Amendment was meant to correct. And then again, by the fact that the 14th Amendment guarantees the same rights as the Civil Rights Act of 1866, and it's very clear that the Civil Rights Act guarantees only life, liberty, and property, or person and property. And the terminology also just limits it to personal security, personal liberty, and property, not personal liberties. That's going to turn out to be the key thing to understand. Is personal liberties, a large area of choice, is at no time talked about in what this amendment guarantees. And so let's keep that in mind. And as we look at B, C, and D,